Inez Bailey.
Inez.
I was Thompson.
Okay, and ma'am, what is your name?
Pauline Stinson.
Okay, you're Pauline.
Pauline.
Nice to meet you. Now that's Polly in the middle, huh?
Yep. Right.
What year was that taken?
I think it was in.
You said you were about 19.
You were about 19, so we 1936. It might have been 1936.
Well, you certainly look like you all having a good time. Who are the other two people?
Well, the one
on the right is
on the right is
Me.
Sugar.
And the other one is my twin sister.
Oh my,
That's Trixie.
look at
And
that.
they were always together, all three of them.
We did a lot that summer.
The other
It was
two
just
were
advertising
She's a twin.
Venice.
I'm glad I came.
And so we had, this person took lots of photographs. So we had a lot of postcards made of us. And then, so we sort of did the whole summer just in advertising Venice.
Oh really? So you were part of the promotion for the whole
Right.
city? No kidding.
We didn't know we were,
Cute
but
story.
one day I was at the dime store.
Yeah, that one.
And I saw
There
this
you were.
um,
To have that one.
Yeah, I wanted to see that one. 'cause that
postcard
was
with
a
us.
demo.
And then we began to look, and they kept, all kinds kept coming out, being published and everything.
Did you get paid for that?
Oh, no, we got we got the original pictures, or we got 6 of the pictures. So,
People, people didn't they didn't think about getting paid for those things. That was fun and getting your picture made.
well, and we didn't even realize how much fun it was until
Boy,
it was
Sugar, you were a
always too
knockout.
late. I wish I had, if I were home, I wish I had the newspaper picture. It was
Always
a
gotten
whole
better
spread
looking as
of
you've gotten
pictures of
older.
us.
My name is Addison Van Wagner.
Okay, Addison, we're here to discuss a number of things about the Great Depression. I'm here with Betty Attagliata. Do you have any questions, Betty?
Well, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit. I know you said you born and grew up in Hyde Park, New York.
Right.
Can you remember what it was like in the 1930s during the Depression in that area?
Well, we were very poor, so my father had flu and never quite recovered from it. And he became, lost his job at that time. There was no relief at that time. I mean, as it is today, it was taken care of by the family, the rest of the family, which was a lot of big family in the area. They were mostly all farm people. My father was a farmer, and he never went back to the farm. He didn't want it, and that caused a problem. Which at that time they expected the eldest son to carry out. They owned those properties for 200 or 300 years, so they didn't have a problem in the war. Those people had their farms, except, I mean, we got our food from them, so we could make out, and other people helped, clothing and so forth. And, but it was rough.
My name is Orly Kate.
Well, Orly, what's your clearest memory of the Depression?
My memory of the Depression is that after my father passed on, I realized that he was getting $35 a week from the bank to keep him through, to keep his business going through the Depression, because I was born in 1928 and I did not really experience any of everybody in my family were happy, and I didn't really know what was going on, and that was what happened with us. But he was in the automobile business, and they kept him going, and I didn't realize it till after he literally died, and my mother and I were going through his papers and everything, and found out that he was getting $35 a week from the bank to keep him going, and he didn't lose his business, and he became very successful after everything was all over, after the war and all that.
It was a very exciting time because all the building was going on, great tilt, and there were lots of people around. It was very bustling downtown, but of course I didn't see much of it downtown because we lived too far away. That was a good 6 miles into town. And but I remember several incidences when we did come to town. One being, there had been a huge hurricane in '26 that had swamped the Everglades and killed over 2,000 people. And one of the big events at the Parkview Hotel, which was one of the big hotels downtown, was a big fundraiser for the victims of the hurricane in the Okeechobee area. And it was a big party, lots of entertainment, this beautiful new hotel. I remember several incidences. I remember there was a black quartet that sang. It was a part of the entertainment. I can remember the songs they sang.
Really? What songs did they sing?
Well, they were mostly spiritual type songs. There were oh Mary, don't you weep, don't you moan.
Pharaoh's army got drowned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh Mary, don't you weep. Well, in due time, the boom was surpassed by a bust. The stock market fell. Everybody left town. It just simply, all of these, there were some, I think a couple of hundred homes built by that time, and they all were built to conform with the mandate that they all had to be in the Spanish Mediterranean style. And so they all were in that, so that became the thing, the type of house that I loved. You know, these were buildings that are thoroughly engraved on my memory or psyche or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But when the bust happened, everybody just got up and went off and left them. Everything, the houses were mortgaged, the furniture was mortgaged, everything. So it was to their advantage to just leave it rather than trying to do anything else about it. So there were all these nice homes were just deserted, and many of them furniture and all. But it was a strange feeling because we went from all this bustle downtown to nothing. The only things left open was a grocery store, the post office, a drugstore, and there may have been one or two others that I don't recall. But so nobody had anything, but fortunately there was a gulf and a bay full of fish. People could still raise chickens in their backyard. They could raise their own vegetables, but it was still very, very hard times. And one of my main memories is of, because in those days, parents tried to shield their children. So they didn't tell their children what was going on. We had no idea what was happening, or how it affected our parents. And one day I came home from school, and my mother was stretched out on the couch, crying. And of course, I had no idea why. When I asked her, she said, "Oh, your mother's just blue." And I didn't know what to do. Of course, I felt like crying too. And so I pretended I had a stomach ache so I could cry too. And so we lay there and cried for a while. And it wasn't too long, I guess, after that, and some of this, of course, I found out later. I didn't understand it or know it at the time. But my mother, seeing that that my father had no work, she decided she loved to cook, and she decided to open a tea room downtown. And she went to Jim Tom Blaylock, who ran the bank, and borrowed $50 from the bank. There was no problem with rent. Everything was whatever they could get for it. As a matter of fact, all these vacated homes, you could have bought any of them for back taxes. There was no money anywhere. Street lights were turned off on moonlight nights to save electricity for the city. My mother borrowed this money from the bank. Daddy built the tables. At that point, unfinished furniture was very cheap. You could buy a nice unfinished chair for $5. So he built the tables, and we bought the chairs and the dishes, and presumably with that $50. And she opened this tea room. Well, this was, I'm not sure of the exact date, but it was in the early 30s, 30 or 30, I guess it was 32 by that time, because KMI had come and taken over those other hotels, two of the big hotels there, and brought their entire contingent down. They brought their kitchens and their help and the boys and their administrative staff and everybody down for 3 months during the winter. And so the Colonel Richmond was the owner and the head of the school, and he and his family came down early because of the boys didn't come until after the first of the year, but they came down to get the buildings open and in shape and so forth. They were all still furnished. But Colonel Richmond and his wife and daughter and mother-in-law all came and ate with us at Mother's tea room, and until the kitchen help came down in January. So that helped, and some of the others, there was Major Hodgin and his family, and the grocer down the street, he was one of our regulars. And so it was just, it was hand-to-mouth existence, and everybody made money any way they could. And so then another one of my memories as a child was, of course, the hurricane in 26 is one that overflowed in Okeechobee. Well, the hurricane in 28 was one affected us. We were still living out on the farm at that time, and they had somebody decreed that everybody on the frame homes out on the farms should come in town and stay at the San Marco Hotel, which was the strongest building in town. It was all concrete, poured concrete and so forth. And I remember as a kid running up and down the halls with other kids uh, gathering soap, those little sample soap things from the various bathrooms of because all the doors were open, you know. We had full. I remember the furnitures were all covered in their dust covers, anticipating the winter season, which never happened. For some reason that I don't really remember, my mother took her business to the Triangle Inn, which was an inn about two or three blocks south of Venice Avenue, and that was it was in the 30s. I'm not sure of the exact date, but meanwhile the hospital also, all of this property that Dr. Albee had sold to the BLE came back into his possession, and it was managed by some Venice what they call it, Venice something company from out of Sarasota. At any rate, he took over the old Parkview Hotel, which was the same one that I mentioned earlier, to convert it to a medical clinic and hospital. And he had always had this vision of, Dr. Albee had always had this vision of having a clinic in this climate, because he completely understood the values of sunshine in recuperation, and he was way ahead of his time because he grew his own fruits and vegetables and mineralized the soil so that they contained the minerals and the vitamins that were valuable in recuperation. He was way ahead of his time for that.
You asked about the fire, yes. The cabin was very well insulated with steel, with lightning rods at the top, of course, at the peak, and down each of the four legs into a large circle of copper not tubing, but heavy copper wire buried in as best as it could be buried around the rocks. So it was well insulated. I only had a telephone. There weren't any radios in those days. I had a telephone that came up some 20 miles from Boulder, and to protect the telephone inside, I had a cord that I could pull to open a switch on the pole outside to disconnect the telephone, which I had done. And I was plotting strikes. It got to be a pretty hot evening, and I was plotting strikes on my map when I decided I couldn't see anymore. It was getting pretty dark, so I reached up and turned off the Coleman lantern, which hung above the firefighter's standard, the gas lantern, no electricity up there, and put my knee over. I'd been standing on a glass leg stool, of course, put my knee over under the bed, which had glass legs on it, when kaboom, and I found myself on the floor on the other side of the cabin. Everything on one side of the cabin went to the other side. Everything on the east side went to the west side. Everything on the west side went to the east side, north and south. Everything switched places in the cabin, including the big cast iron lids on the wood stove. I scrambled around and found some matches and lit the kerosene lamp again and found this utter destruction in the cabin. It was a mess. But I did a little straightening up. It bothered me because when I put the lid back on the stove, I didn't hear it go clang. And I realized that I didn't hear anything. My hearing had gone. That bothered me some. And there's nothing I could do about it. So I turned the kerosene lamp out and went to bed. Got a good night's sleep. Got up the next morning and found pulled that switch back into operation on the telephone pole, and nothing happened. I didn't have any telephone, and I smelled some stuff that smelled as if it was burning. I finally opened up the old crank-up telephone, you know, battery-operated crank-up telephone, where you get operator down in Boulder. And that was all fried on the inside of the telephone. But it was my response. Other than that, I went outside and I found 7 spans of the wire of the telephone lines, a 2-wire high-tension steel to carry it up that steep gradient. And he left me some climbing spurs and telephone wire to replace the stuff. So I went on down the line 7 spans till I found some, and the pieces of wire were all cut up into about 4-inch or 5-inch pieces and shaped like U's and scattered all over the ground. I don't know why the power did that, I have no idea. And they were malleable instead of high tension steel where you had to bend the wire. You could almost wrap them around your little fingers. Well, I got down to the 7th span and there was the wire hanging down off the pole, and very foolishly I grabbed it to see if it was good wire or malleable, and I got socked pretty bad by static electricity that had built up in the line. If power lines had gone across it, I'd have been history right on the spot there. But then I spent 2 days restringing the lines, and I got them up and was working on the inside and trying to repair the telephone, hook it up right. I had instructions for a Kellogg telephone, I think it was, and this was a Westinghouse. That didn't help.
Did you get your hearing back?
Yes, indeed, the hearing came back within a few hours after. Well, by the next morning, my hearing was pretty much back. How it went, I don't know. I don't think I ever heard the thunder. Perhaps because I was in the middle of it, I don't know. But anyway, it was, the ranger came up I saw his pickup down there and saw him get on his horse to come up the trail because I had been out of contact for 2 days. And he came up and he helped me rewire the inside of that telephone because he knew how to do it. And he said, by the way, the operator in Boulder has been listening to you. You couldn't hear her, but she could hear you. And he said, she told me she never heard such colorful language in all her life.
Well, at that time in my life, I don't think we realized that it was a depression.
I see.
We didn't have a lot of money, but that was all right. We didn't need a lot. We just was busy living and going to school.
Yeah, I'm so glad.
And the school was here in Venice, or where did you go to
No, it
school?
was in Nokomis.
Nokomis, okay. How many people were in the school?
Doesn't that make you feel good?
Yeah.
That does me too.
Well, we had those that came in by bus from Laurel
And then more of us that you can see this many
from
people
Englewood.
that
Oh,
you
yeah.
know.
So to us, it was quite a large school. And my father was instrumental in keeping it getting it to be a high school,
Not that I've known a lot.
so that the people that graduated would be eligible for college. So that's the one thing I remember, that he was so anxious to get it to be a high school.
It's amazing, we're talking to people who were here when the town was created. That's very unusual. We've talked of this, you know?
Well, take it a little further back, it was my great-grandfather that settled up Nokomis. And my father was born here in 1885, so we go back a long way.
Did your father build the house?
No,
No.
no.
Did the BLE to build the house? This was
Yeah.
what the BLE did it build the house? The brother?
It was already built when we moved in.
Uh-huh.
It was one of the early ones, you know, all around Venice. Oh, there's so many that were not occupied and never lived in. Shame.
But they were all built by the
I can
union, the
remember going
brotherhood.
in all these houses and taking the keys out of the doors.
Yes.
Well, they had keys to closet doors, each bedroom door and all that. My friend and I'd go around and take all the keys out. That was something we did when we were little.